In 2017, UFC President Dana White delivered a brutal ultimatum to Colby Covington: become more entertaining or find a new job. Despite his successful record, Covington's grinding wrestling style wasn't selling tickets and the promotion was ready to cut him without hesitation. Then came the moment that changed everything. In a calculated post-fight interview in Brazil, Covington unleashed a venomous tirade, calling local fans filthy animals. This single inflammatory outburst generated more attention than his entire fighting career combined. The Missouri national champion had discovered his formula for UFC survival, a controversial persona that propelled him to an interim title. But this transformation came at a tremendous cost, creating a prison from which he could never escape.
So when people say they with it, it's like they with me, and that feels cool.
Colby's wrestling journey began at Thurston High School in Springfield, Oregon, where the Pacific Northwest mornings often found him alone on the mats hours before his teammates arrived. In the shadows of Oregon's towering Douglas firs, he built himself into one of the state's premier talents, claiming a state championship that served as his launchpad to greater achievements. The humid wrestling rooms and grueling training sessions at Oregon State University became his second home, where his trajectory continued upward despite facing elite competition. At OSU, Covington's relentless wrestling style began to take shape. Though not the most naturally gifted athlete, his conditioning stood unmatched. Former teammates remember a vastly different Covington than today's controversial figure, saying Colby was never the loudmouth back then. He was actually one of the quieter guys on the team, totally focused on his training. He'd be the first one in the wrestling room and the last to leave. By his senior year, Colby had transformed himself into an NCAA Division I All-American, finishing 5th in the nation at 174 pounds with a 38-12 record, placing him amongst collegiate wrestling's elite. After graduation, Covington joined American Top Team in Coconut Creek, Florida, beginning his MMA transition with the same quiet dedication under coach Dan Lambert's guidance. He supplemented his wrestling foundation with striking and submission skills. His UFC debut came in August 2014 against Annie Wang, resulting in a first-round TKO victory. Between 2014 and 2017, he compiled an impressive 7-1 record, with his only loss coming surprisingly to Wally Alves. Despite the winning streak, something crucial was missing in his fan engagement. UFC viewership data revealed a pattern. His fights ranked amongst the lowest drawing bouts in their entire history. A 2016 Fight Night preliminary between Covington and Max Griffin drew fewer viewers than any other fight on the broadcast despite his dominant performance. The disconnect between competitive success and market value became his liability. UFC matchmaker Sean Shelby reportedly pulled him aside after his victory over Dong Hoon Kim in 2017 with a stark message. The organization was considering not renewing his contract despite his 7-1 record. The ultimatum presented Colby with an impossible choice: remain authentic to his quiet nature or create a persona that would generate attention. The seeds of his controversial transformation were planted in this moment of his career, setting the stage for one of the most dramatic character shifts in sports history. His grinding, control-heavy style produced victories but few highlight reel moments. In a promotion built around spectacular knockouts and charismatic personalities, Covington's technical dominance wasn't translating to commercial value. The UFC's message was clear: win or lose, Covington was simply too forgettable to keep around. With his back against the wall and his career hanging by a thread, he stepped into the octagon in Sao Paulo on October 28, 2017, with a career-defining challenge before him, facing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu legend Damian Maia in hostile territory. Against Maia, a former title challenger and submission specialist, Covington displayed remarkable wrestling prowess. He neutralized his strengths, stuffed takedown attempts, and gradually wore down the respected veteran. As the final bell echoed through the arena, Covington secured a unanimous decision victory, but his calculated transformation awaited. Snatched the microphone from UFC commentator Daniel Cormier, releasing a relentless barrage that was heard worldwide.
I should have knocked him out! Brazil, you're a dog! All you filthy animals suck! I got one thing to say! Tyrone Woodley, I'm coming for you! If you don't answer the front door, I'm gonna knock it in and I'm gonna take what's mine! That welterweight belt!
The reaction cascaded through the crowd like wildfire. What had been a standard disapproval erupted into a raw, unfiltered hatred. Security personnel immediately swarmed Covington, forming a protective barrier as they hustled him from the octagon directly to his dressing room and eventually to his hotel. Within hours, Covington had transformed himself from an anonymous wrestler into the sport's most polarizing figure. Covington had become the villain fans would pay to see lose, a crucial archetype missing from the welterweight division. Despite official reprimands, the UFC capitalized on his newfound notoriety. Metrics validated Covington's gambit. His social media following exploded overnight. His bouts moved from preliminaries to main events. His paycheck increased substantially. The previously anonymous wrestler who couldn't move the needle had discovered what had eluded him. But for Covington, the transformation came with unexpected consequences. The character, created in Sao Paulo, Brazil, began consuming the quiet wrestler from Oregon. Each public appearance demanded escalating rhetoric to maintain the controversy that had rescued his career. The calculated villainy required constant feeding, more outrage, more boundaries crossed. What began as survival evolved into a persona that would define his entire public existence. The villainous character Covington created needed something more potent than insulting foreign countries to maintain its momentum. He recognized the fundamental truth about attention in combat sports. Controversy that divides the American audience itself would generate far more interest than uniting them against a foreign target. In August 2018, Covington stepped into the White House, championship belt gleaming over his shoulder, standing proudly beside President Donald Trump, a calculated career move that would transform his trajectory forever. By aligning himself with the most polarizing political figure in modern American history, Covington discovered the perfect accelerant for his controversial persona. The red "Make America Great Again" hat became as essential to his fighting identity as his wrestling credentials, creating instant emotional reactions from viewers that translated directly into his viewership numbers and promotional opportunities. The strategy paid immediate dividends. UFC's internal demographic data confirmed what Covington had gambled on. Political polarization drove engagement. Audiences tuned in, either hoping to see the MAGA fighter triumph or desperately wishing to witness his downfall. His bank account swelled with each politically charged appearance, securing main event fights against high-profile opponents and former champions like Robbie Lawler and Tyron Woodley. The controversy machine he'd built guaranteed media coverage that fighters with superior records but less proactive personas could only dream about. After defeating former champion Tyron Woodley, Covington received a congratulatory phone call from President Trump during his post-fight interview. But rather than discussing his technical victory, Covington used his platform to criticize Black Lives Matter and NBA star LeBron James whilst praising first responders and the military. Behind this calculated exterior, however, glimpses of Covington's true motivations occasionally surfaced. In a rare moment of candidness, he admitted the political alignment was more strategic than genuine, saying, "I just want to be the best fighter I can and make money doing it." Each public appearance demanded escalation, more outrageous statements, more devised rhetoric, more boundaries crossed. The quiet wrestler, once described by college teammates as reserved, now seemed incapable of appearing without inflammatory commentary. The mask was becoming the man, with authenticity vanishing with each passing interview. The pressure to maintain relevance drove Covington towards increasingly dangerous territory. What began as generalized political rhetoric evolved into personal attacks and statements so controversial that even the UFC, an organization hardly known for correctness, found themselves issuing rare public rebukes of their own fighter. Covington had crafted a persona that demanded constant feeding, more outrage, more division, more attention at any cost. The political alignment that saved his career and filled his bank account now trapped him in an escalated cycle of controversy from which there appeared no exit. While the world saw a heel character willing to say anything for attention, few witnessed the real-time collapse of his training environment at American Top Team, where former friends became so hostile that one of MMA's premier gyms could no longer house both Covington and his growing list of internal enemies. What began as promotional banter rapidly transformed into genuine animosity that fractured the gym's foundation. His verbal assaults targeted former friends Jorge Masvidal, Dustin Poirier, and Joanna Jędrzejczyk, converting training partners into sworn enemies. Training sessions grew tense, collaborative work grew impossible. The sanctuary most fighters rely on for support became ground zero for Covington's most personal feuds. The toxicity escalated until Dan Lambert, American Top Team owner and Covington's longtime friend, faced an unavoidable decision. By May 2020, the unthinkable happened. Covington's name vanished from their team website, a digital excommunication reflecting his physical departure from the gym where he had evolved from prospect to championship contender. After defeating Robbie Lawler, Covington aimed at Matt Hughes, a UFC Hall of Famer who nearly died in a train accident, saying,
Hey, let's talk about the lesson we learned tonight. It's a strong lesson that Robbie should have learned from his good buddy Matt Hughes. You stay off the tracks when the train's coming through, Junior. Don't matter if it's a Trump train or the Colby train. Get out the way!
The backlash intensified when he invoked the dead for promotional purposes. His comments about Kamaru Usman's deceased coach, Glenn Robinson, forced the grieving family to issue a public statement, saying, "Do not use our father's death to promote UFC 245. Their pain was palpable, their objection reasonable, but Covington's persona demanded the controversy continue." These incidents marked a significant shift in how UFC leadership viewed Covington's approach. Dana White, typically tolerant of promotional extremes, drew a boundary, admitting, "We're in the fight game. Mean things are said. One of the things that I really don't like is family. It's just a nasty thing to do." In combat sports' attention economy, Covington discovered a troubling reality. Each shocking statement grabbed headlines while simultaneously burning bridges. The isolation became profound. Where most champions rely on extensive training networks, Covington progressively narrowed his inner circle until few remained. The persona that initially revived his career evolved into a professional liability, limiting his access to elite training partners and gyms, destabilizing his preparation for the biggest fights of his career. As Colby entered the UFC 245 championship bout against Kamaru Usman, his depleted support system stood in stark contrast to the robust team surrounding the champion. The self-imposed isolation that had been brewing for years would now face his ultimate test on the sport's grandest stage. What happens when a man who built his entire identity on being unbeatable suddenly finds himself broken, literally and figuratively, on the same night? December 14th, 2019 marked the collision between Covington's carefully constructed facade and the unforgiving reality of elite competition. The fight itself was remarkably competitive. One judge actually scored Covington ahead 39-37, while another had it tied 38-38 headed into the championship rounds. For those first 15 minutes, Covington's script unfolded perfectly until the devastating third round turning point. Between rounds, Colby uttered 6 words that would forever alter his trajectory.
I think I broke my jaw.
This physical fracture symbolized something far deeper than the first significant crack in an armor of invincibility that had been his most valuable asset. When Usman secured the 5th round TKO victory, the man who had built a career through his mouth had been silenced by championship level violence. In the aftermath, Covington refused vulnerability. He blamed referee bias and maintained he was winning the fight until the injury, unable to concede that his character possessed human limitations. The persona demanded projecting strength even in defeat, a psychological prison of his own making. His rematch with Usman at UFC 268 proved equally competitive but ended with the same result, another defeat, this time by unanimous decision. The narrative surrounding Covington's inevitability had permanently shifted. 2 failed championship bids suggested his persona generated headlines but couldn't overcome the ceiling he now faced, though Covington did secure redemption by defeating former friend Jorge Masvidal at UFC 272. The victory ran hollow regarding championship aspirations. It demonstrated his ability to defeat a fading star with whom he shared personal history. By UFC 296, Covington's promotional tactics reached new depths of desperation. During the pre-fight press conference, he shocked observers by referencing Leon Edwards' deceased father.
No, I'm bringing you to 7th layer hell. We'll say what's up to your dad while we're there. Oh!
The entrance to UFC 296 was spectacular. American flags, pyrotechnics, and the unmistakable presence of Hulk Hogan by his side. Yet as Colby made his way to the octagon, the spectacle could not mask what would soon become painfully apparent. His return against Leon Edwards revealed the cruel evolution of Covington's career trajectory. The entrance that projected the image of a superstar stood in stark contrast to the performance that followed. The relentless pressure fighter whose cardio once struck fear had vanished. In his place stood a slower, more hesitant version, one that prompted Dana White himself to make the observation that Covington looked old and slow, words that would have been unthinkable just years earlier. The transformation extended beyond Covington's physical abilities. The fighter's whole identity revolved around overwhelming opponents with a suffocating pace had mysteriously eroded, raising questions about whether maintaining his controversial persona had extracted a hidden toll on his development as a fighter. By positioning himself as the villain everyone loved to hate, he inadvertently created a target that made him the most satisfying fighter to defeat. Every opponent found extra motivation, dedicated exceptional preparation, and studied his tendencies with uncommon thoroughness. Could Covington reinvent himself at this late stage, or is he permanently trapped in the character he created? At 36, with diminishing physical tools and audience interest waning, his path forward remains uncertain yet compelling. In the end, the character Colby Covington created to save his career became the very thing that limited it. His legacy poses a haunting question: can a man escape a prison of his own design? Like a mask worn too long becoming the face, the quiet wrestler disappeared as the villain amplified, the joke that extended his career ultimately becoming the punchline that defined it.